Brodes Media.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. We have teams advancing already. The Boston Bruins. I'm a little shocked. It only took 5 games, but here we are. Wow, Nashville back from the dead. I'm sure you want to just come at me because I came at you for your take in the beginning of that series, and they exploded. Matt Duchene in overtime. It was a crazy, crazy weekend. I guess we'll start with appreciating or acknowledging the teams that advanced. Colorado, nice, easy breeze, just completed it. They just bang. What do you know? Bang. They're done. They're through to the second round. And then the Boston Bruins. I'm shocked. Look, after a couple overtime games, I stated I was a little surprised. It didn't feel like the Bruins should be with the upper hand. I felt like Washington probably could have came out on top in some of those games, but I watched Washington. I thought their defense was atrocious for a lot of those Boston goals in that final game, whether it was Pasta who took it to the net after putting it in between his legs, or just poor gap control in general through the neutral zone, which allowed the Bruins to score off some turnovers as well. Just sloppy play. And to see the Capitals go down that easy, I'm a little surprised. So your thoughts on Colorado, Boston Bruins taking that next step the way that they did?
I love how you took all of 10 seconds to jump into your defensive positioning and all of that, the gap control. I mean, those are the things that you notice way more than I do. I notice it sometimes. I'm not saying I didn't.
Well,
you know what it was?
That's because my gap was always off.
That's true. There we go. I'm not terribly surprised that Boston won the series. I had it going 6, but, to me, I felt like there was every reason to believe Washington was going to come back and win Game 5 going into Game 5 until you saw the way that Game 4 started to end, and I watched a team that had frustration all over the place. Washington was clearly out of their element, frustrated, looked like they were focusing on the other things, and not only that, but I think the key was winning special teams. Washington's power play didn't get it done. Simple as that, and that's why Boston was able to jump ahead in these games. That looked like 2 totally different games from the first 3 where we were talking about it's close. Oh, this is still going to go on for a while. This is Boston just doing what they needed to do to finish this thing off as quickly as possible, and doing it with their best guys delivering offensively, with their defense holding up. Washington outshot Boston in that final game 40-17. Now, what do you think was the difference in that one?
Yeah.
They have a great goalie. Tuukka Rask is outstanding, and Washington had questions, and there you go. I think that's what it also came down to. So I'm not surprised by a lot with this. I think, actually, believe it or not, now I think this is huge for Boston because you get the extra time. You get to watch these other 2 teams go at it, beat each other up, and you get to sit back and take a break. That's got to be great for them. And yeah, sure, no matter what happens, or just about no matter what happens, I mean, it would have to be an Islander series win for them to get home ice to start that series. But whether they have to go to Pittsburgh or whether they get to start on home ice, they get a few days here, starting with Monday night when only Game 5 is being played in the other series, and then there's another game to come 2 nights later, and then probably at least another day in between, maybe 2 before you start the next series. They're going to have most of a week to just sit there and relax and get ready for the next opponent, obviously, while these other 2 keep going at it. So that is huge to me. And then I'll jump over to Colorado, which I had this one going 5. I gave St. Louis a game, but I'm not surprised. We all kind of knew that Colorado was the better team on paper. I think it was huge in Game 3 to see their depth come through instead of us talking about, like, for once it wasn't the Nathan McKinnon show, okay? Like, it was nice for it not to be, to see them come out in that regard. And then, they don't get the first goal of Game 4, but they really just pull away from there. And yes, at that point in time, the dagger to me, I mean, I think a lot of people felt that the dagger was the goal between, McKinnon's on the rush, get it over to Rantanen, game over. I mean, 3-1 game over.
Yep.
And they locked it down from there. That's a really good team. We're going to get into more with the other series that will still have games to come, but it's starting to look like we're going to get the matchup we expected in the West. And so Colorado's no surprise. I don't think it's a surprise where the other one is going, maybe shorter than what we expected, but I don't think it's a surprise where the other one is going either. So we're watching. I think that the message of the weekend in general, last couple of days, I was like, we did Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday games between shows. I feel like the message now, or what we're seeing now, is for the most part, not in every series, we'll get into that, but most of the series, we're seeing the teams that I think we all thought were going to be the ones to emerge starting to show that. Like, we saw a couple surprises early on. Maybe their series were like, oh, that's closer than we thought. Whatever. Like, I feel like every series, if there's a team with a lead, we feel like we're like, yeah, you know what? Now we're seeing how that team stacks up and how they're continuing to do it. And that's why they're up by 2 games in a series, or in some cases 3 in a series.
Yeah.
You know, like we're seeing these teams emerge. And I think that now we're starting to either find the ones that are going to last a long time, or the ones where we're going to be, by the time we do another show, we're going to be like, those series are over. Let's get to round 2.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And with Boston, I guess I'm not surprised that Boston won. I thought that they were going to win. I looked at, we knew that both teams had stars, but there's something about Brad Marchand, Bergeron, but it did come down to goaltending. And when you saw that Craig Anderson was in net at one point, you figured, hey, now the advantage is even stronger, even though Samsonov played as good. I mean, he made some really tough saves in there as well. But I think the moral of the story for that series in general is just the mistakes that Washington did make. The Bruins made you pay. They just made you pay every single time. While with Tuukka Rask, you maybe maybe you needed 3 Boston mistakes to score that 1 goal, while Boston only needed 1 mistake for Washington, whether it goes back to that Dylan turnover in overtime. But Brad Marchand really stepped up. I mean, he's been a damn leader out there in this series, scoring goals when you needed to, being in the clutch, and then with the Taylor Hall and Pasta with the beauty, you just had their veteran guys really perform at a high rate. So I'm not surprised that Boston did win, but I am a little surprised that it seemed like Washington, their leaders didn't show up as much as I would have anticipated. And for it to go 5 games is what stunned me the most out of it. But I'm ready for a Boston series. As much as I don't like them personally, they make it fun. They make it entertaining. And it was one of 2 ways. I definitely didn't want to see Tom Wilson advance, so screw you. But at the same time, I don't want to see Boston advance either. So it's like a lose-lose, but also a win-win based off of whoever lost, whoever won.
Well, look, I think that because last show, you came right out of the gate and said, it doesn't feel like this series is 2-1 Boston. It feels like it's a different direction, right?
Yeah.
And here's my thing. I think maybe what we saw was the way that double overtime game went. I think Washington probably could have deserved a better fate out of that game. They looked like they were getting some pretty good chances in overtime. I mean, you're talking about 2 posts. They looked close to ending it multiple times. So that's the turning point for me. Boston looks like they almost steal one in that second overtime because it looked like a matter of time before Washington scored to win that game. Boston wins it instead. And then from there, all it took was falling behind in that game 4. And now Washington looks like they're lost. They're a lost cause, and it's over. And it really felt like the series was over then. If not on when Game 5 was played, if not then, like it happened, then definitely when they went back to Boston and played Game 6, if it would have gone that far. Like I feel like it was.
Does this mean anything for Washington in terms of change? I mean, they bring in Lavi, right? And I don't expect it to be a head coaching change already.
No.
But does this do anything? I mean, you literally just lost in the first round. And I know it was competitive because you look at all the games that went in overtime. But I bet you as time moves forward here, you look at it as you lost in the first round in 5 games. And context sometimes, loses its power.
Right.
How close and you go, you lost in the first round in 5 games to the Boston Bruins. Is there just little things that need to be tweaked, or do you just run this thing back? I mean, does this mean a lot in terms of change in Washington?
I don't think so. I think that's also because, I mean, look at the biggest name that you can find who didn't perform near what we probably expected. Alex Ovechkin wasn't on the board all the time, and that has to do with the Boston PK shutting things down and doing what they had to do. I mean, Washington had 7 power plays in Game 4.
Ridiculous.
And didn't score on 6 of them.
Yeah.
And by the time they did score, it was. Let's face it was kind of a fluke play because it's a shot where I think Ovechkin's trying to pass. It hits it. It breaks his stick.
You didn't like that one?
Well, no, it just doesn't happen. I mean, the odds of that happening every time you try it, where the stick breaks and it goes into the slot like that. There's 2 guys waiting back door, by the way, and it doesn't even get to them. It hits a Bruin instead and goes in. So it's his goal. And that he had 2 goals the whole series, and that was one of them. That's
I wonder
the thing
if he's
too.
banged up still a little bit, because
Exactly. And I think that's why
I
think that's why you don't overreact, because you go all of that stuff, the guys who you got back literally within the same week that you played the series that were on the COVID list, like this is a little different than the teams who sit there and go, well, it was a COVID year, and we missed the playoffs terribly. This is, you made the playoffs, you were right there in the division battle. You had every reason to believe that you were going to make a longer run than this. And just some things happened, whether it was injury or COVID list or whatever. But I don't think it means that you take that team and go, you know what? The whole thing's got to go. I don't think you do that. Not even close to that. Maybe defensively, shore some things up. Absolutely. But I don't think there's a lot of change. And I think also they'll chalk it up to experience when it comes to the 2 young goaltenders who, in the grand scheme of things, didn't get a lot of playing time because Vanacek was gone halfway through the first game, and Samsonov got the last 3, which was a unique experience for him because he wasn't the guy from the beginning. So it's just weird. So I think you just chalk it up and see where it goes from there. But it's definitely interesting to see that it was over as quickly as it was when you went from game 3, double overtime, could have gone either way, to 2 pretty convincing wins for Boston.
Yeah, and since we're on the Eastern teams, why don't we just throw it on over to the Islanders, Penguins? And I'll be honest with you. I like to try and feel out an identity of a series. Mm-hmm. I got nothing for you.
Got nothing on this?
Nothing. I don't get it. It's one win, one team. Like the Islanders smoke them. The Penguins win. I have no idea the trajectory of this series, the feel out of this series. I think you're getting something random every single night. And I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I hate that. I like to get a sense of where this is going. And it just, I guess maybe the best way to describe it is choppy. It's very choppy series. That's the way I kind of see it.
Sure.
How about you?
So it's funny because there's a series we're going to get into later where I'm writing down little notes for every game of the series. So I had a hypothetical question after a game that was played, and there was one that was going to follow before we're doing this. So now that question almost feels null and void. This one, I have a question following game 4, though, so it's relevant going into game 5 on Monday night. First of all, I'll go back to game 3 for a moment where Pittsburgh does get a win because Jeff Carter?
Wow.
Is it 2012 again?
Everyone that made a big acquisition, it seems, for the most part, those guys are stepping up. Boston, and that was the question.
Boston's was huge. Yeah, we know that.
But so is this, though. Jeff
this
Carter's
is
been
huge.
Sniping every single game, it feels.
So this was a weird one because you got Jeff Carter looking like it's 10 years ago. A 2-goal game from Cal Clutterbuck, which who saw that coming? The game-winning goal, I actually literally wrote down batter up from Brandon Tanev because he just, knocks it out of midair, scores a game winner. I thought for sure after that game was tied, we were going to overtime. I thought for sure. And then Pittsburgh comes back, gets that goal, and locks it down, finds a way to win that one. But then I look at game 4, and I go, that this is, you know what it is for me? That's the Islander team I remember from a year ago, from last year's playoffs. That's it right there. Bounces, taking advantage of mistakes, getting, creating everything that works for them so that they come out on top in a game like that by a significant enough margin. I mean, these games were all pretty much right there for the taking from either side throughout. This one, totally different story, and this was a convincing one. And my hypothetical question, which you can certainly address, is game 5 a must-win for Pittsburgh now? Because I kind of think it is.
Wow. Is game 5 must win? I mean, I think I could see why people would say yes to that because you lose that game, you're in some really tough.
I feel like if it goes back 3-2 Islanders going back to Long Island, I think that they find a way to win the series.
I'm gonna say no, it's not must win, and I guess it's very similar to what we were saying in last week's episode. If you're down 3-1 and you're Washington, you're the Washington Capitals with
right.
TJ Oshie, with Alex Ovechkin. It's never over until it is over. Now, I mean, if you use our logic here, it ended up being over real quickly, so maybe you are right in this hypothetical that you throw out there. But with Jeff Carter scoring like he's 22 years old, with Sidney Crosby, with this team, I can't rule out winning game 6 in a tough spot if they are down 3-2. So I'm not going to say it's must win because their culture is winning culture over the last however many decades it feels like. But I see why their backs would be against the wall. But sometimes the best of the best play their best when their backs are against the wall.
Sure, and I don't discount it from Crosby or anything like that. I also think that game 4, without everything, I don't want to make it sound like it's all his fault because it was far from it. But it kind of, we saw over these 2 games, it kind of brought out moments of the worst for Tristan Jarry. Like, we talked about the high glove thing last show. It's still there. If I heard correctly, because I think there was one, I think it was in game 4. I think Brian Boucher was doing the game. Did I hear him say 5 goals high glove in the series in 4 games?
Yeah, at one point.
Like, that's just nuts.
At one point, it was every goal. So whether that was after 2 games, 3 games, at one point it was every single goal. And that's going to be the downfall eventually. That's why we talk about Tuukka Rask the way that we did. And I mean, come on, we all watch hockey. We know the goalie's so important. That's going to be the downfall of this team. Think about if they had a goalie. If they had a goalie, we would be way more scared of this team and think that they can actually do some serious damage.
And you know, it's funny too. We went back and forth about what does Barry Trotz do with his goalie on the last show, right? And we kind of got game 3 right because we're like, oh, you know what? You might go to the veteran because you tend to lean that way. And he did, and they didn't win the game. And he went to Ilya Sorokin, who's a rookie, in game 4 and nearly got a shutout. I mean, it was down to 4 minutes left when they finally scored a goal. So it's like, and the game was so well in hand at that point because it was 4-0. So, okay, so you finished with a 4-1 win. He probably has earned game 5 at this point. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I just don't, it's not to say, let's put it this way. He won you game 1 and now he's won you game 4. It makes you think, maybe you need him in goal right now. Maybe just right now. Next series could be totally different. This is how Barry Trotz operates. Next series could be totally different. And by the way, don't you love, I saw on Twitter, I think, going into game 4, he said his goalie was not only going to be a Russian, but it's a Russian who catches left-handed. So he really likes to play this thing up. It was funny. But yeah, I think, again, to an extent, did he push all of the right buttons? They were in that game 3. They could have won it. And then he pulls the other one. He goes to the other guy. And they win game 4. He really just pushes the right buttons as a head coach and gets the right guy in there at the right time to win a game. And for me, that series got really interesting. Because I guess I think if I'm asking the question, if game 5's a must win for Pittsburgh, game 4 was definitely a must win for the Islanders. And they got it done convincingly. That now makes me rethink the entire series at this point.
Yeah, but guess what? There's no flow in this series. That's the problem.
There is no flow in this series.
Yeah, there's no flow. So you're right. The Islanders took a nice – they did. They hit them with a good punch. But guess what? The way that this thing has played out, there hasn't been flow much generated after each of these wins. It's been choppy. So we'll see. I'm very fascinated to see who takes control in Game 5 because it's obviously a big one. It puts you up 3-2. So
I wonder if that favors the Islanders though, because I feel like Pittsburgh needs to get on that roll. That if they strung a couple wins together, they're going, okay, now we got it in where we want it and things like. And you can't feel that way at 2-1 in a series because you're not quite there yet. Like everybody knows how important Game 4 is because in a 2-1 series anyway, because you go, all right, if your team it's up 3-0 and you lose Game 4, don't let it go straight to your head just yet. You're still up 3-1. If you lose Game 4, just go finish the job the next game, make the adjustments. But if you're up 2-1, Game 4 can mean everything because you just don't want to go back into that. You don't want to be in a best of 3. And that's what we got right now. And I think that might actually benefit the Islanders, that if you get into it where they seem like they can make that adjustment without having to worry about playing one game in between where they get it going, like they don't need to string the wins together to then get the series where they want it. I think Pittsburgh does. So I think if they win Game 5, then they go into Game 6 looking like they're ready to go and maybe trying to string those wins together. I still have it being Pittsburgh in 7. I don't think that this series is over. Obviously, it's not over yet. We're going to play 2 more. I don't think it's out of the question to think there's a third one coming.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I can support that logic too with the Islanders. Maybe this benefits them because you're right. There is something about having a little bit of confidence with the Penguins, and if it is choppy, Barry Trotz pushing the right buttons, it all can maybe lean towards the Islanders. But how about we move on to a series I know that you're ready for, and that is the Nashville Predators. I'll tell you what, I texted you. Holy hell, when Matt Duchene scored that overtime goal and the place was rocking, and then I watched them win in double overtime. And, man, I'll tell you what, Carolina, I mean, that game was unbelievable. That last game that went to double overtime, that was unbelievable. A lot of big saves were being made for Carolina, huge saves to keep them in it as much as possible. But eventually it cracked, and Nashville scores. The place was electric. And I hate to go down this road, but when I watch the Jets come back and I watch a Nashville game, I just wish I could close my eyes and have that much fun and watch that many fans go crazy in a game where you score 4 goals and you come back from the end. We'll get into that, but man, that atmosphere was amazing. And the Undertaker gift, that's what I think of when I think of the Nashville Predators. They come up from the coffin and they're back from the dead. I would have never thought. So kudos to you, sadly, and kudos to Nashville for tying the series up.
The sad part is I had to literally send you a birthday message first to just get that out of the way and then go, I can't wait to rip you the next.
You didn't want to send me no happy birthday. It was by default. It's like, damn it, I guess I have to send him a happy birthday.
No, actually what it was, in all seriousness, I was going to tweet out what I did for your birthday, and then I'm like, you know what? He's texting me now, so this is an open opportunity to say that first and then just go in for it, because like you even said, like, I think all you did was just send like Nashville, and I could even hear your tone, like, Nashville, man, like, can you believe this? Like,
ridiculous.
Like I could just hear it. Like, I tried to tell you, I said home ice was going to matter when they went back to Nashville. It was going to make a difference.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, you're talking about double overtime. That's a flip of the coin game.
In both, I mean, both games were double overtime. And if nothing else, these two teams are going to wear each other out before we get to the next round. I mean, that's a lot of extra hockey to be played. I didn't write these down for game 4, but I did for game 3, so I'll read my things for game 3. Warrior workload on defense from some of these guys. I mean, Brett Pesce plays nearly 40. Brady Shea plays just shy of 38. Dougie Hamilton gets just shy of 37. Roman Josi was outstanding in both games. He's been outstanding. And I believe he had the assist on the winner for Duchene. He had the flip pass that went out through the neutral zone, which was outstanding. And then, and like, I actually wrote it down when I wrote down the Nashville defensemen. I kept hearing their names on the broadcast on that for game 3's win. I'm going, yeah, they mentioned Josi a lot. Ekholm was mentioned a lot. Ellis was mentioned a lot. And then I looked at ice time and realized the second highest defenseman in ice time was Alexander Carrier at 35.01. And I'm like, I don't even know much about this guy, to be quite honest with you. And he's the guy who's stepping up and delivering.
You know what's
big
crazy?
Ice time.
If you're a defenseman like that and you don't get your name called, you don't hear your name a lot, and you check back and you say 35 minutes, you had a great day at the office.
Absolutely.
If your name doesn't get called and you're just doing steady play, moving the puck tape to tape, whatever, outlet passes, and your name's never called, it's like, holy, what, 35 minutes? It's a good day at the office.
Yeah, I mean, that game 3 was really a good watch, and you had ridiculous deflections. You had skill goals. I mean, the Duchene one we both reacted to at the same time. Like, that was just what a play there to make that one. Because I don't really know if there was a moment going, like, it started to feel like, and when you get to a second overtime and it's not the long change anymore, like the second period is, you sense like there's not as much open space, so it's more laid back. Almost like, I feel like the first overtime in any playoff game, if you can get through the 20 minutes, which as we've seen, doesn't happen all that much, at least in this year's playoffs, you start to settle back and go, okay, now I'm not going to take the big risk. I'm going to let the play come to me more than try to create it myself. And yet, we got a goal like that in the second overtime, a goal where it is one of those plays. It very much looked like Roman Josi was trying to create an opportunity. Matt Duchene, it almost looked like a set play. I mean, Matt Duchene's
I bet you it
really
that
going
is.
down ice.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely like, dude, flick it up and I'll beat the defenseman kind of thing. And yeah, that was a beauty. My jaw. I remember watching. I was actually sitting in my office. I was getting stuff done, and I have a TV off to my left. And when I saw it happen, I just remember like freezing, going, not like my jaw just dropped. I was like, whoa. That was a beauty. The fans. I'm telling you, the fans. I hate to keep doing it, but
know.
the fans.
It's such a both of them though. I mean, both buildings. Like honestly, if you're watching this series and not take like if you're having issues one way or another as a franchise right now, take notes from this one because these are two markets that people don't think come out in big numbers like this, and it doesn't work in these. Go watch. I mean, just watch the way these crowds react to these teams. These. Both of them. It's crazy atmospheres. But I loved Game 3. You know, the skill goals, by the way, on top of Duchesne's. Philip Forsberg had a really good one. Vinny Trocheck from where he scored a goal. Are you kidding me with that shot? I mean, when I think
of him, all I think about is him in a Panthers uniform. Is that weird?
I know.
Yeah.
But so on top of, and then the deflections, Ryan Johansson had an outstanding one. I mean, he had a goal later on in Game 4 too, but he had one there, and then you had two goals. One for each side. Ryan Ellis scored one and Sebastian Aho scored one that are sort of that kind of style. I mean, they weren't deflections off of teammates, but they were throw it through traffic and watch what happens. And I think we saw a little bit of everything. And you're mentioning Carolina's goaltending in that double overtime of the Game 4. That Carolina outshot them dramatically in this one. I mean, it was legitimately Game 3 was right there. I think the final shot total was 54-52. It's right there. That's anybody's taking. You could see it that both sides had the opportunities. It was a relatively close, like it was legitimately a close game. This did not feel that way at all. I mean, Carolina took 61 shots, and you know, kudos to UC Soros for coming up with another huge game that gets it to where it is. I feel like. And I guess I'm peeling back on the ripping of you for this because, in truth be told, Carolina's been the better team in the series.
Definitely.
But here's Nashville kind of. I don't know if it's. I wrote down two different things about it because I don't know if it's just Nashville riding the atmosphere of home ice, which certainly could be the case, or kind of in a way, and this is where your Undertaker gif is perfect, right? Because it turns into, are they just that underdog team right now? Where they go, you know what? Even down 2-0, no, just like in the regular season, nobody's given us a shot, and here they come, right?
Like, well, let me throw your question back at you. Is Game 5 must win for Carolina? Because heading back into that building, but here's the problem: if you go to double overtime, as I just alluded to, either team, I mean, that's an inch away. That's a bounce away. So it's not like they're losing 6-0 in this wild atmosphere where they can't generate any sort of success at all. They could just as easily win in those games just like they lost. So, you know, it would be different if they were just getting the doors blown off of them whenever they touch Nashville ice. But I do think that there's something to be said about that atmosphere where they don't want to go back to Nashville down 3-2. I look at this in I would say more so, yes, in this series than I would a Penguins-Islanders series for the whole Game 5, Game 6. How important is it?
That's an interesting point, and I agree with you to some extent because I don't think any team, especially if you've now had trouble finding, like, even if we just want to call it what it is, you've had trouble finding a way to win these two games. It's not like you haven't been in it, like you said, but you're having trouble finding a way to finish the job here, and that means to me, I mean, to an extent, I feel like this series for Nashville, and I know it's a very different core group, or some of the same core, but it's not completely the same core group. Definitely a very different team from the one that went to the Cup final. But when they were in the Cup final against Pittsburgh, the whole thing was they couldn't win on the road in that series. They just couldn't win on the road. They came home, they tied the series up 2-2, lost Game 5 horribly, and then it was, well, if they're going to, I don't know if they're going to win a Game 7, but they would have a shot in Game 6 just because of the atmosphere. So if they find a way to win a game on the road and come home, I don't know if you want to be in that position if you're Carolina. The only reason I think the other one is giving me that vibe, like the Islanders are giving me that vibe about, like, if Pittsburgh doesn't win Game 5, I feel like it's detrimental to them, is because of the way the last game went. The fact that it was actually one where you went, that was convincing. And it was probably the first one in the entire series that you go, that was really convincing. Carolina's got technically, I'll say one of those. We could say two by final score, but realistically, that was a 1-0 game through most of it in game 2. So I don't want to say that was a truly lopsided game, but I think that game 1 was what they can be on home ice. So I think they need that kind of game, no question about it. But I think the fact that there was actually a result going against a team like Pittsburgh where you go, this game wasn't even close. I mean, this wasn't even close. If Nashville wins that game, not in double overtime, and wins 4-1 instead, then I'm probably feeling the same way that, like, as you're expressing. But I think that because it's so close, I feel like Carolina's in it no matter what, and I think that could go a different direction. I think that it's still going to be one of the best series to watch down the stretch, because now that you've got two of these that are tied and require a game 6, like we don't, and this is what I meant when I said earlier about how it just doesn't feel like we're starting to see teams emerge as the ones that I guess are the ones to beat in these series. Because now it feels like I thought that I had no series other than the Colorado one going 5 games or less. I didn't have a single one. I thought everything was 6 or more because everybody's been so close. And for the first 2 or 3 games of each series, I felt right about that because I'm like, yeah, I still can't get a read on these series. Every single one of them, you're like, yes, we've got a series here. And now I look at some of them and I go, we might have only 2 that reach 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting to that point. And it's like, all right, so like now when do I get to move to the next round, so to speak? And again, I'm not trying to do, because we said that about this Carolina series. We're like, oh, could we just get the 2 teams we think are definitely going to make it? And one series, we definitely have one I think that's going to make it. But we're like, can we just jump ahead, get to the second round? Because we know who's going to be there. Like now that's the West. The West, it's like, yeah, we know who's going to be there. Let's just get to it. But you've got these other series where it's like, once we get to the second round and it's even closer, we're going to be more excited because of the fact that it's down to 8 teams left total. Every series should be really close at that point. If it's not, then you're going to know an awful lot going into the Final Four about the teams that really are getting there convincingly, if that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. All right, so I kind of want to get into what's happening in some of these Canadian these Canadian matchups right now. So with Toronto, the game 1 was just, heartbreaking in so many ways, and it's one of those sports moments where it doesn't even feel like the game matters anymore, but you still have to find a way to get through it. And, the conversation between what happened with Corey Perry and Nick Foligno and all, I didn't think there needed to be a fight, in my personal opinion. I don't think
I agree.
I also respect how it went down, though, because if you watch the fight, it was almost like Foligno was like, look, I got to do this. Perry was like, all right, fine. It wasn't like he was throwing major punch. It was almost like, let's just do this, settle this, and move on. They both acknowledged it. It wasn't like huge haymakers were really getting thrown. It almost, in my opinion, looked like Corey Perry was holding back a bit, knowing that he wasn't just going to, throw aggressive, insane punches and then try and murder him or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't love the fight. I didn't think it was necessary, but I also understand hockey culture, and it's almost like, hey, I got to do this. Just let's do this and move on, and they did it, and it was fine. But the good news is John Tavares is doing the best that he possibly can with the circumstances, and just a scary moment in sports. No one did it on purpose. There was no intent, no matter if it's Corey Perry, who has a little bit of history or not. He's falling. Corey Perry tries to jump out of the way. The leg hit it. Very scary moment, and it's a tough game because it's hard to analyze much of it because it's a human life, more like outside of the game issue that occurs.
Yeah, for sure. I understand what you're saying with the kind of the code of everything and things like that. I get it. I just still I understand. I guess that Nick Foligno's thing was, I'm trying to get the teammates back into it because we're all shook by this a little bit. I still don't understand why it had to happen. I mean, if you saw it in any sense, and there was enough of a gap, and I get it, there's concern for your teammate in that moment, so you're not trying to look at like the iPad or anything like that, but if you saw it enough times, and believe me, they've shown it enough times for everybody who have seen it by now, then you knew it was a freak thing.
I don't think it wasn't done with intent. With the freak thing, though. I really don't. I think Foligno knew that. I think it really came down to just, and I wonder how much of it was like, I'm new to this team. How much of it was like him being new to the Toronto Maple Leafs?
My thing with that, though, is that then if your comment turns out like becomes, it's our captain on the ice who's not getting up. I get that and I respect it, but it's like, you don't have to go pick a fight with the guy who accidentally bumped into him to make a statement at that point. In my opinion, you really want to do something like that, I forget how late in the period it was, but it was getting there. It was almost the end of the first period. It was relatively late. And it's like, then go to the room, regroup, and kind of rally around him and go, we're going to win this game for him instead. Like, that to me was the better message than I got to go just pick this fight because that's our captain. Like, it's a freaking, if someone took a run at your captain and you want to go and then send the message back, go send the message back. But it was a freak accident. And I understand Corey Perry has a reputation. I understand how it could look the wrong way. I mean, it's a scary situation. A guy tries to get up and he falls over backwards and doesn't know where he is, clearly, and on top of it, in addition to the head injury, the concussion that he's got a knee injury too out of it. Like, it's just collectively, it's an awful situation and you never want to see it. And definitely, like, as I'm watching his facial expression, trying to even move in any way after he got hit like that, you're freaking out because it's not like this is just another player here. This is John Tavares. This is a superstar in this league. So it freaks you out a little bit. But yeah, it certainly does make a lot of the things beyond that secondary, despite the fact that you got a decent hockey game after that, all things considered, because it was close. It was, you got a good game, but it didn't feel like it in a weird way. I mean, and look, don't get me wrong. Paul Byron scores a shorthanded goal that was ridiculous. I mean, highlight reel.
How about Josh Anderson?
Yeah, I know. You kept talking about how you like that one. I mean, and that's pretty good too. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, that's all that Montreal got essentially in this game was 2 breakaways that worked out in their favor because, yeah, guys who just knew what they were doing with it and went in there and took care of it. Byron's was ridiculous, and you got the Carey Price that steals games. You got the Carey Price that steals you a game in a series, and I can't, I'm not gonna lie. When you see Montreal win game 1, didn't it come into your mind probably like, here they go again, this team that nobody gives a shot to, and
I almost looked at it.
They find a way.
You say that. I almost go, here we go again, Toronto Maple Leafs. You go, here we go again, the Canadians find a way. But I think
I wasn't going to go that far until game 2. Like, if it was 2-0, then I'm like, oh, here we go, Toronto.
Because of the emotional ties to this series, it's so hard to get. Like, it's similar with me with the Islanders and the Penguins. I don't have a feel right now because it's so raw in the mix of things. Game 3, I think, will be telling. We'll have more knowledge on, what we see in these teams after we see 2 games removed from that emotional tie. But, I mean, production-wise, it's such a huge loss to have to make up. If there's a team that can do it, I do think the Toronto Maple Leafs are the team that can probably find ways to find that unique scoring and unique playmaking ability of John Tavares throughout their lineup. I'm not saying it's easy. Any team is going to suffer if you lose the point production that he provides and everything. The two-way game, all of it, the winning face-off draws, literally everything he does is going to be hard. But I do think that one of the reasons why we looked at them as one of the strongest teams in the league and why they were winning so many games this regular season is because they had a lot of talent running up and down their lineup. So, if there is a team that I think can at least keep their head above water for some time, I do think it is the Maple Leafs. So I'm fascinated to see how Game 3 plays out. But they had a good ass whooping. They did. They whooped their ass in Game 2. So that is a bit of a statement.
I've loved watching Austin Matthews in this series, even in game 1 when he didn't get on the production side of things and things like. Because I mean, did you see the scrum where he's just laughing the whole time? Like, and then he had another moment in game 2, and on top of it, had a goal and 2 assists, and looked like himself. And it's like, yeah, this is okay. Now Toronto's back because Austin Matthews came through with a huge game. Like, and I love how he's having fun with this. I guess I have 2 questions for Montreal following game 2. First of all, I think this has already been answered before, probably because I feel like it's just kind of obvious. Does Montreal depend on Carey Price? Because I feel like if you can't keep the game low scoring, they're not in it. Like, if it turns into one of these scoring games where you have to make up for 4 or 5 from Toronto, they're not going to keep up. So, like, do they have a chance if Carey Price isn't helping them in that regard? And sometimes it's not always his fault, but do they even have a chance if it's not 2-1 games, 3-2
Probably
games,
not.
like stuff like that?
Probably not.
And then I see, because I believe me, I think that the other thing too is we were just talking about like that. What's the here we go again moment for Toronto? Montreal scored first in game 2, and then 5 goals after the fact. But Montreal scored first, and it was Jesperi Kotkaniemi who scored after he was scratched in game 1, and
I was going to ask
that's
you
the
that.
only goal.
How do you feel about the Canadians just I praise not going with the young guy. I praise veteran leadership, but there's a line where you're just going to, like, you got to, like, these guys are part of your franchise. Like, these kids are part of your growing experience. Yeah, I stress veteran leadership and all that, but I still also stress growth and development in sports.
Right.
And these kids are supposed to be your future and eventually your veterans that you lean on. So how do you expect them to grow and expand their knowledge of playoff hockey if you're not going to play them? So there's a time where that's like, would you scratch Kaprizov and Greenway if you're Minnesota because they're too young? No, you allow them to go out there, play, learn, adapt. Like, and if you fall because of it, but you can't just take them off the ice. That's ridiculous to me.
And that's why my question on that line is it time for Cole Caulfield? Because at some point in time, and don't get me wrong, maybe I was a little confused by even him being out for game 1. I don't know why you wouldn't have him in there, especially when he was kind of getting into a rhythm at that level toward the end of the regular season. But maybe the other thing about this is that now that's the guy who can be your shot in the arm, who just gets you some energy where you don't have. And listen, I think your point on Kaprizov is perfect because there have been times in that series against Vegas where he looks overmatched as a younger guy, as a guy with not a lot of experience. And you go, all right, this will be the learning experience for him. If assuming that series ends on Monday, down the road, whenever it may be, they don't win the series. You learn from it. You come back better. You know what it takes to play in the playoffs now. And you take that mental note. I feel like anybody who's a young player who loses in a playoff series gets better because of it, because you get that sense of what it takes to be part of a playoff team that can win. Because whether that's as a depth player or not, you don't have to be the star to get that experience, because then you sit there and you go, okay, I watch those veteran players who are the stars, and they do most of what they have to do to help us win, but it's on guys like me at that point. Like, you start to point to yourself and go, if I can improve and then give us more, then that might put us over the top. So, like, you focus on helping those guys. I think that'll apply to a lot of teams that don't make it through in this first round. But I wonder if this series looks any different if Montreal changes things up a little bit and just keeps injecting some of that youth in there. I think that's what put them on the map a little bit, outside of Carey Price playing like Carey Price last season in the playoffs. I think that's what put them on the map. I don't think a lot of people paid attention to Nick Suzuki until they saw him in the playoffs and went, wow, this kid's good. And I think you can do the same thing with these two. I think Kotkaniemi got that started a little bit a year ago, but you can really do it again this year. And same thing with Cole Caulfield. Maybe it's time.
Wasn't Nick Suzuki Vegas's first draft pick, or am I wrong when I say that?
I don't think he was their first draft pick. I think, because believe it or not, I think their first draft pick was Cody Glass.
Oh, yes, you are correct. It was Cody Glass.
But he was in
Suzuki,
the same vein.
Yeah, he came over with the trade for come on, he was their captain.
For Montreal?
Didn't he come over in the Pacioretty trade or no?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Well, now I got to look it up because I need to know.
Well, while you're looking up Vegas players, do you want me to talk about Vegas?
No, yeah, you can if you wanted to. I wanted to get in that Jets-Oilers one because I don't know.
Oh, yeah, because we were still in the North, but
yes.
I didn't have much to say about the Vegas series anyway, to be honest.
They did. He came in the trade with Tatar, Suzuki, and a second-round pick in 2019.
Okay.
There you go.
I forgot for a while that Tatar played for Vegas for a brief period there.
Yeah, he did.
I forgot that was a trade because he went over to Vegas from Detroit.
So how about that? Okay. Yeah. Anyway, the useless knowledge that we don't need. Jets Oilers. Wow.
This is nuts.
Wow. They were up 4-1 in the third period. They allow a power play goal, and I had a bad feeling once they scored that power play goal. Perreault scores it, and I'm like, uh-oh, there's a little bit of life. Just a little bit of life. And then before you know it, Mike Smith's allowing a softie, and it's like, all right, here we go. And the Jets come back and win. Wow. I mean, I'm really like speechless about it. McDavid finally gets on the board with a couple of assists.
Right.
I jokingly said, what happens if this team ends up getting swept and Connor McDavid gets 0 points? Even if they get swept and he gets 2 or 3 points, I think at this point the conversation's going to be had. Dude, come on, man. This is brutal for a superstar that gives you 100-plus points a year and is giving you 100-plus points in 56 games, and you can't even deliver. I mean, regardless of what happens, unless it's a miraculous 7-game series at this point, if they make it a 6-game series, you still go, well, you went down 3-0 and you lost a 4-1 lead in the third period. That forced you to be in this spot anyway. I don't think there's a way you get out of this. So, wow, that's my closing thought. Wow.
So this is the series. I hinted at a series where I had a hypothetical question that was null and void because it was the first game of the weekend. This was the series. So I watched game 2. It's a 1-0 game. Jets win it in overtime. And you watch and you go, well, the goaltending was good both ways. The goal was kind of scored off of a nothing play. I mean, it's a distance shot, and don't get me wrong, Paul Stastny's a great player, and has had this great career, but it looked like the last play you would have expected a goal to be scored on. And then because of that, you look at the other side and you go, well, there's another 0 on the board for Edmonton. So that means that the 2 leading point guys in the league this year didn't have points again. Okay. So I asked, my hypothetical question after that game was, so the Jets clearly have the momentum. Can Edmonton make the adjustments? And it looked like they did. They come out, they get a lead. You see McDavid on the board, Draisaitl's on the board. McDavid's on the board with points, not goals. But that's kind of the way it's gone. Draisaitl gets 2. You go, okay.
Yeah,
now I see it. Like it's
involved.
Yeah. You're like, all right, they're back. Okay. And it was there, and it was very much in a game that everybody knew they had to win. So you go, okay, cool, they're back. And you see 4-1. I believe the goal was scored with 15-17 left in third period, the 4th goal. And they still led by that margin. There's 9 minutes left. So you're really starting to get to the point where you're going, well, this is exactly what we thought was going to happen. It can't last. It couldn't last the whole way for the Jets. It didn't seem like it could, and then they get 1 on the power play. And then they get another. And what cracks me up about it is look at the way they're scoring. It's traffic. It's throwing a shot low to get a big rebound. The Blake Wheeler goal is such an example of what they have been doing in this series to create those opportunities. And then you get, I don't want to just gloss over the fact that, of Josh Morrissey's tying goal, which was, again, screenplay.
One of them I didn't love from Mike Smith. It was like a low wrist shot that was like very low off the ground. Like, out of all those goals, but he also made a couple big saves throughout the process.
I feel like the one that you're going to be talking about then is the Wheeler one, because it was off the pads and it's a big rebound, and nobody picks up Wheeler going to the net, so he's wide open to just slam it home, and you go, that was avoidable. In a lot of ways. And then to actually get to the overtime, Nikolai Ehlers, what can you say? I mean, he comes back from being out for, I think they said, out for about a month, and he comes back and he scores 2 goals, including the winner. And so now, I mean, you kind of hinted at your takeaway from it. Mine is Edmonton's done. They're done. I honestly think not only the reason that they're done is because they're down 3-0 in the series, but the fact that you have to come back and play on Monday night right after this happened, like, if you're the Jets, I want to be back. I'd want to be back out there. It's not even 9 a.m. yet on the East Coast. I'm like, I'd be ready to go right now.
I think
I want to play as soon as possible.
Yeah, no doubt. I think one of it's funny because we can apply some of these same questions with some of these series, and I asked it with Washington, but this one's a little bit different. Change in Edmonton. What do you do at this point? Because this is a different scenario.
This is a very different
scenario. Now, I'm not going outrageous here and say you're trading McDavid, you're trading Draisaitl. No, you need those guys, of course. But what do you do? I mean, there was already change in certain areas with this franchise as it is. What do you do? What do you do?
And I don't know if there's a good answer to it per se. I said it to you, and you agreed because you were like ready to say it yourself on the last show. If this turned into 2-0 Winnipeg, it's gonna get into their heads, and now you're really in their heads at this point. I mean, it's 3-0, and now I don't know how Edmonton comes back from that, being up 4-1. I think I saw it. That's the first time that a team ever came back from down 3 goals in regulation and then won the game in overtime in the last 10 minutes of regulation and won the game in overtime in league history.
Wow.
Like, it never happens. So how do you come back from a comeback like that? I don't think you do.
I thought Tippett was hired a little bit, or he was hired in 2019, so I thought he was 2020. So I mean,
no, he was hired the same time as a lot of these coaches were that went into their first year was the COVID shortened year,
right?
The first COVID shortened year. I guess is that how we have to look at it?
Yeah, I guess we do.
I don't know. Anyway, but what I think what you do, especially with your star players on this team, you got to ask the hard questions when it's time to pack it all up and do exit interviews. And you've got to ask these hard questions about what you're going to do to get over this type of stuff, because this is going to be 2 years in a row for them. And I'm not trying to, make it seem like Winnipeg is an equivalent to the Chicago Blackhawks from a year ago, where it's the same thing as a 5 losing to a 12. No, it's not the same thing. But still, like, I sit there and I just go, you can't go into a series where you're the 5 seed against the 12 in a year that was as weird as it was. You can't go in and then lose the last 2 to lose a series 3-1 when everybody kind of picked you, and then go into this one and just get swept. Like, you can't do that. You can't lose 6 playoff games in a row and not be getting asked the hard questions.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's amazing. I can't believe we're sitting here talking about this, but the Jets seem to be cruising. But look, there's with Tampa and with Minnesota and Vegas series, I'll be honest with you, as we're running out of time here this morning, it seems pretty inevitable, right? Can I say that?
The Vegas one for sure, and to me, the missed opportunity from Minnesota was you had a 2-0 lead on home ice. You looked like you were in control of that game, and then Vegas just came back with all of the talent and power they had.
I was gonna say,
it makes a
sense.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I started to think, because like we joked earlier, the Nashville home ice thing, that doesn't matter. Carolina's still the better team. We really thought home ice was going to matter for Minnesota, and for the first period it did, and then the second period that was gone.
Yeah.
The Tampa series to me is over for a totally different reason, because I got excited about the fact that Florida made that push and won in overtime to get it back to 2-1 in the series. And then you watch the team get totally frustrated again and start taking cheap shots at people. And it's like, if that's where your head's at, you're not going to survive. Yep. So Tampa's going to find a way to move on. And now I wonder, kind of in the same vein as Boston, if Tampa wins on Monday night, closes it out, and you've got a 2-2 series the other way, how great news is that for Tampa to watch Carolina have to play 2 extra games against Nashville now if they are to move on, or to get Nashville, who might, we asked already, did Nashville empty the tank to even get into the playoffs? Now, are they going to empty the tank just to get through this series? Tampa could be cruising to the Final Four.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know Kucherov needs a lot of rest too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Kucherov. If anybody needs it, it's Kucherov.
Well, especially when you're, again, taking a stick to the back of the knee like that. I mean, that was,
I was just making a joke. They didn't play all year, and then here he comes.
Oh, I know, but no. After that injury, I'm really curious, to be honest, because that was at a point when the game was over too. The game's over. So what are you doing?
Yeah, actually, that's bad on me. I wasn't referencing the poor horrendous decision of the slash, but I digress. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Open Ice Hits, and we'll see you next time.